Hello and welcome to the Clinical Cousins YouTube channel. This video is going to be over blood transfusion reactions. So in order to understand blood transfusion reactions, one of the first things you have to understand is how do we get blood types and why are blood types important? Well, blood types, it says it in the name, they're types of blood. So if there's different types of blood, that means your body could recognize one as your own or self, and there's a chance you could receive another type, which wouldn't be your type, which your body would recognize as not self. And that would excite the immune system, causing a reaction, hence what causes these blood transfusion reactions. But again, to know those, we need to understand a little bit about typing. Now, most are errors that come in blood transfusion reactions now, especially in our country where we have so many policies and procedures and protocols, come from human error in the labs, error on the part of those drawing and labeling the blood. And hopefully this video will show you and teach you why it's so important that we follow our procedures tightly, very closely on these, because if we're given a transfusion, the patient is going to need those. We don't just give blood or give blood products to people who aren't in need of those. So we want to make sure the blood we give doesn't cause more harm. So what are the blood types that we have in the human body? And of course we know those are A, AB, and O types of blood. Now, how we get these is a little different. In our body, we inherit genes from our mother and our father. And in that, we inherit our different blood types. So maybe our mother has the gene for A, and our father has the gene for B. And due to that, we could end up with different combinations of blood types, as we'll see here in a minute. What's interesting about this is these aren't like an autosomal dominant. These are actually co-dominant, so that means we inherit from both of our parents, and they're both are dominant, or they both have a play in what blood type we are to inherit. So where do we get our types of blood? Well, the types of blood that we have are based on a sugar that is attached, or it's called an antigen, that is attached to our red blood cells. And that sugar looks like, in this case, this is a glucose, and then an N-acetyl type, so that's an N-acetylglucosamine attached to another complex, which is a galactose with a fructose attached to it. So if we had this structure attached to a red blood cell, our red blood cell would be considered H type or O. So this is what creates is this sugar is considered an antigen, or something potentially your body could recognize as foreign, that is attached to the red blood cell. And this has a lot to do, it has everything to do with how we type these. So if you saw this particular sugar on attached to a red blood cell and your immune saw this, it would say, oh, okay, that's O type. So if I have O type blood, my body's going to say this belongs to me. Now there's a reason we can give O to anybody, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. And that reason would be is the base of every single blood type has that glucose, galactose, fructose, normal acetylglucosamine backbone. So if I were to draw A, it would have that backbone, or that beginning structure or base structure. If I draw B, it would also have this structure to start with. So that's one of the reasons with O, we can give O to anybody. Of course, we also need to look at the Rhesus Factor to make sure it's negative or positive, or they have it or they don't. But in that case, all of these start with this backbone. And that's why when your body looks at it and it looks at an O, O is considered weakly antigenic, or it's just not recognized as something foreign about your body. And the reason why is it's the backbone of the other blood types. So if we had type A, we would add one more complex to the base of our O, and it would be another NAC group, or in a single group. So if you look, there's two A's in this, and that's A-type blood. Now, if we go to B-type blood, we just have the galactose here. Now, it looks like this would be a similar backbone, but this is actually its own group, or its own sugar. So when you remove this, it actually looks different. So in this is a group, this is a group. If we took this NAC off this, we would say, oh, well, that's in the backbone of all of it too, but it's not, because this forms a whole piece. That forms a whole piece as well. So when we take off this, it makes a different looking sugar that your body recognizes different, and this type would be called blood type B. So that's how we get there. That's why O is looked at similarly, or you could give O to anybody, is because the backbone or the root of all blood types have that combination of sugars there. So your body always sees those in every blood type, and it always recognizes that as self. However, with B or A, or if we put A and B together and AB, those give us combinations that look different to your body, or add different sugars that are attached to your red blood cells. Now, how do we inherit those? In those, and how we inherit these through this codominant fashion, we can draw the Punnett square. So we can say this side will be from the mother, and then we'll say this other side will be from the father. So we'll draw our A, our B, and our O here. So there's a chance you can get any combination of this. You could have AO blood type, or BO blood type, or AA, or BB, or AB blood types, or OO, which is the only way you'll get O, as far as an antigen or sugar that's attached to the red blood cell for your immune system to potentially recognize as foreign. So if we look at this, if the father had A and the mother had A, we could have AA, two types of A attached since it's codominant. If the mother had A and the father had A, we could have AB blood type. If the mother had A and the father had O, we could have AO blood type, which we need to remember, every one of them has a base of O, so this would be recognized as type A blood. Now, same thing here. If the father had A and the mother had B, we would have BA blood type, or AB blood type. If the father had B and the mother had B, we would have BB blood type, or B blood type. If the mother had B and the father had O, we would have BO blood type, which would be B blood type, since we're going to have that sugar attached. Now, if the mother has O and the father has A, we would have AO. So again, that would be A blood type. We would have BO here, or B blood type, mother-father combination. And here at the end, at the last, we would have the mother and the father both had O. We can have a combination of O and O, and that will give us our type O blood type. So this is how genetically we end up with these different blood types. We can have A, we can have AB, and we can have O. Now, anytime there's an O with an A, due to the fact that is the base of these, that just means that we have an A and an O together. It means if this was the father and the mother combination, they could have the chance of having a child with O, because they're carrying both A and O, and B and O. If the mother had AA and the father had BB, well, now they're not carrying a base for O, although there's some rare genetic predispositions that could potentially make this different, that we would have no chance of having an O type, because we would just have combinations of AB blood here. So that's genetically how we end up there. These are the blood types, and why we have those are due to the different sugars attached. And if we always remember the base is the same for all of them with O, it makes sense why O can be given to anybody, Because everybody's got that base, so everybody's body's going to recognize O as their own. Again, we have Rhesus Factor, and I believe it's the most important one is the D, and that's the one we can be positive or negative for. 85% of the population is positive for that. 15% are negative for that, and that becomes super important during especially pregnancy. It's one of the reasons we have to give RhoGAM. It is because of this, and we'll talk about that later on in the blood transfusion reactions. Other thing we need to know is the serum is where the antibodies are found that float around and will fight off the different blood types that it doesn't recognize. When we're first born, we really don't have these, and oddly enough, as we eat food and we're exposed to food and the bacteria in our gut, it becomes exposed to different combinations of these antigens, and because of that, our body starts making antibodies to the different blood type. So if in our serum, which serum is if you put all your blood, your whole blood into a tube and you let it clot up, and all the clotting factors would activate and it would form giant clots. And if you took that clot out, what would be left would be called your serum. Plasma is different, and plasma is if you splint it or let it settle, it still contains clotting factors where serum doesn't. But serum holds your antibodies that can be used to fight off infections of different types. It also contains antibodies that will fight off if you get a blood type that's wrong in your body. It'll start attacking the blood that you're receiving. So in your serum, if you have A blood type or B or AB or O, if you have A blood type floating in your serum, or you have an A antigen, or this up here, and that's your blood type, you're going to have floating around in your body a anti-B antigen, so that if your body comes into contact with that B type of blood, it'll fight it. If you have B type of blood in your serum, you're going to have an A immunoglobulin or antibodies floating around to fight off anything that's not B. If you have AB, well, you're not going to have any of those antibodies floating around, which is why with B blood type, they can receive blood from anybody. So while O can give to anybody, AB is a universal recipient because they don't carry antigens, because they have both A and B antigens. So they all have the base of O on them. So A, B, and O, their body recognizes as, hey, that belongs to me. So it doesn't need to fight it. So therefore, AB doesn't have those antibodies. Now, O, you're going to have antibodies to A and to B. So you'll recognize those as foreign if they come into your body. And now what they call these antibodies, which is a little different, we call them antibodies, but when they're found in the blood, they call them agglutins. And they call your blood typing agglutinogens, which is a little bit different. So if you see that on blood typing and you're like, what is it talking about agglutins? Well, what agglutins do is they cause aggregation. They cause things to agglutinate or stick together. So if these antibodies get hooked to a red blood cell, and there's an antibody, the little peace symbol, they'll start making them clump. And because of that ability to make red blood cells clump, they're called agglutins. So the antibodies that are the opposite of whatever your blood type is. So if you have an A blood type, so you have A agglutinogens, if you have this as your type, then you're carrying agglutins or antibodies to the B type. So these will combine. Another important point we'll go over in the next video, we're not doing typing, is A blood types carry IgM antibodies against these antibodies, or IgM type and A, but O type carries IgG antibodies. Now the big deal with these is IgG antibodies are single antibodies like this, whereas IgM antibodies are a whole lot bigger. So These bigger ones are called IgM, and they're usually in other reactions. They're the first antibody your blood produces before they switch over to IgG. But the importance of these being part of your agglutins is these IgG are a lot smaller. So during pregnancy, these can cross. So in O-type bloods, these IgG antibodies can cross over and affect the baby, whereas these IgM antibodies in these blood types can't. They're too big, they're too bulky to cross over. So if you have to watch this video a few times, it's important to understand these processes, as these processes are how we type blood and why our body recognizes different blood types as foreign invaders and others as not. You'll need this info as we move on into our next video, which will discuss different types of blood transfusion reactions and why we have them. Hopefully from this, it's sort of intuitive and you can sort of figure out the immune response we're going to have due to the different typing.